In the annals of Celtic mythology, few entities evoke as much dread and fascination as the Bananach, the demons of war. These spectral beings, often referred to as the Bonano, are not creatures of flesh and blood, nor are they bound by the mortal laws that govern the living. They are entities born from the chaos of battle, the suffering of warriors, and the blood-soaked earth of countless battlefields. The Bananach are not merely observers of war, they are inextricably linked to it, existing in the liminal space between life and death, between the clash of swords and the silence that follows. The origins of the Bananach are shrouded in mystery, as ancient as the wars they are said to haunt. Unlike other mythological beings whose births are marked by specific tales or events, the Bananach have no clear beginning. They have simply always been there, silent watchers on the edge of battle, waiting for the blood to flow. Some believe they are remnants of a primordial force that predates humanity itself, a force that has always been drawn to conflict and violence. Others suggest that they are the spirits of fallen warriors, men who died with rage still burning in their hearts, unable to find peace in the afterlife. The Celts, with their deep connection to the spiritual world, believed that how one died was of great importance. A violent death, especially one that occurred on the battlefield, could trap a soul in the mortal world, preventing it from moving on to the next life. The Bananach, according to this belief, are the result of too many such deaths, too many souls left unquieted, too much rage and sorrow left unresolved. They are the embodiment of the chaos and suffering that war brings, a collective manifestation of the pain and despair of those who have fallen in battle. The Bananach are not like other spirits or mythical creatures. They do not haunt homes or linger in graveyards. They do not whisper in the night or slip between the trees of ancient forests. Their domain is the battlefield, and their presence is felt only in the midst of bloodshed. They are not warriors themselves, nor do they take part in the fighting. Instead, they are drawn to the chaos of war, feeding on the suffering and death that it brings. Their appearance is as unsettling as their nature. Descriptions of the Bananach vary, but certain features remain consistent across the tales. They are often depicted as gaunt, skeletal figures, draped in tattered shrouds that seem to move as if caught in a wind that no one else can feel. Their skin, if they have skin at all, is pale and stretched tight over their bones, resembling something long dead and left too long in the cold. Some say they have no faces at all, just blank spaces where features should be, while others claim their faces shift and change, flickering between the last expressions of the dying, agony, rage, and sorrow. One of the most consistent elements of their legend is their wings. The Bananach are often said to have vast, ragged wings, large and black like those of carrion birds. These wings trail behind them like torn banners on a battlefield, and they do not move with any earthly rhythm. Some say their wings do not flap at all, that they simply glide through the air, hovering over battlefields like vultures waiting for the dead to fall. Others claim their wings beat with a slow, unnatural rhythm, stirring the air with each silent pulse, sending waves of unease through those below. The Bananach are not merely passive observers of war. They are deeply intertwined with the very fabric of conflict, and their presence is often seen as an omen of death and destruction. Some believe that they are drawn to battlefields by the scent of blood and the cries of the dying, feeding on the suffering and chaos. Others go further, suggesting that the Bananach are not just drawn to war, but are actively involved in shaping its outcome. They are said to whisper to men, urging them to violence, ensuring that war never truly ends. In some versions of their origin, the Bananach are tied to the Morrigan, the Celtic goddess of war and fate. The Morrigan is a complex figure, often depicted as a harbinger of doom who moves through battlefields like a shadow, choosing who will live and who will fall. Some say the Bananach are her creatures, serving her in ways that mortals cannot understand. Others believe they are beyond even her control, existing outside the grasp of gods and men alike. Whatever their true nature, the Bananach are bound to the battlefield. They do not haunt the living in the way that restless ghosts do. They do not seek revenge or justice. They are something else entirely, something that exists because war exists, something that will not disappear until the last blade is sheathed and the final battle is fought. And if the stories are to be believed, that day will never come. Warriors have always feared the obvious dangers of battle, the clash of swords, the crack of bone, the slow creep of death when the fight is lost. But there are other fears, deeper fears, that come from knowing that even if you survive the fight, something else might be waiting for you. Something that isn't human, something that doesn't bleed. The Bananach are one of those fears. For many warriors, the sight of the Bananach is a death sentence. To see them clearly is to be marked, and for some, the sight of them is the last thing they will ever see. The Bananach do not just claim the dead, they choose them. There are whispers that they are drawn to certain warriors, marking them long before their final moments. Perhaps it is strength that calls to them, or perhaps it is defiance, the refusal to fall when all others have. Some say that those who are chosen can feel it, a heaviness in their bones, a weight in their chest, as if something unseen is already waiting for them. But not all who see the Bananach die. Some are left behind, but never untouched. These are the ones who return from battle changed, not by wounds or scars, but by something far worse. They wake in the night, screaming of things they cannot describe. They speak of voices that whisper in a language no living tongue should know. They claim to see the Bananach even when the war is over, standing in doorways, perched on rooftops, waiting just beyond the veil of sleep. Some say this is their punishment for surviving when they should not have. Others believe it is proof that the Bananach do not always take immediately, that sometimes they linger, watching, waiting for the right moment to finish what was started. The Bananach do not just appear during the heat of battle. They are also present in the aftermath, lingering over the dead and dying like carrion birds. They do not touch the dead, nor do they guide them to any afterlife. Instead, they claim them in their own way. Some say the spirits of fallen warriors do not rise to the halls of their ancestors, nor do they wander as ghosts. They become part of the Bananach, their forms lost within the swirling mass of shadow that drifts above the battlefield, forever bound to the death they once knew in life. This is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Bananach, their ability to consume the souls of the dead. They are not like other spirits, who may seek to guide the dead to the afterlife, or who may linger as ghosts, tied to the mortal world by unfinished business. The Bananach are something else entirely. They exist only to feed on the suffering and death that war brings, and they do so without remorse or mercy. The Bananach are not just a threat to the dead. They are also a danger to the living, though in a different way. Their presence on the battlefield is enough to unravel the minds of those who sense them. It begins as unease, a shiver in the spine, the feeling of being watched, the creeping realization that something is near though no one can see it. Then comes the madness. Warriors who march to battle with confidence in their blades feel their hands tremble. Kings who once led with unwavering certainty begin to second-guess their every decision. The strongest of men feel the weight of an unseen doom pressing down upon them, as if fate itself has turned against them. Some say the Bananach whisper, not in words, not in voices that can be understood, but in something deeper, an unspoken suggestion, a twisting of the mind. Those who hear them lose themselves slowly, their thoughts turning inward, doubts multiplying like rot in a wound. They begin to see things that are not there, shadows where there should be none, glimpses of figures standing at the edge of battle, waiting. Some lose control before the fight even begins, running into the woods, abandoning their comrades, convinced that to stand and fight is to meet something far worse than death. It is said that when the Bananach gather, their presence darkens the sky, turning day to dusk and drowning the battlefield in an eerie, unnatural gloom. The Bananach are not bound by the same laws that govern the mortal world. They do not fight, they do not bleed, and they do not die. They move through the world like a shadow cast by something unseen, slipping between places as easily as mist rolls over a battlefield. Some believe they are ghosts, restless spirits of the dead, but they are not. Ghosts are tied to memory, to unfinished business, to regrets that chain them to the mortal world. The Bananach have none of these things. They are not echoes of the past, but forces of the present, drawn to bloodshed not because of what has been, but because of what is yet to come. Their greatest power is their presence. They do not need to strike or wound to leave destruction in their wake. Their very existence is enough to unravel the minds of those who sense them. It is this power that makes them so feared, not just by warriors, but by anyone who understands the true cost of war. For all their terror, the Bananach are not invincible. They are something that exists only because war allows them to, and this is their greatest weakness. Without battle, without bloodshed, without the chaos of war to call them forth, they have no power. They do not linger in times of peace. They do not haunt men in their homes or torment them beyond the battlefield. Once the swords have been sheathed, once the bodies have been buried and the crows have taken what they will, the Bananach fade. They return to wherever they came from, waiting, silent, for the next war to call them back. To summon the Bananach, certain rites were said to be performed before battle. Blood was spilled, not in combat, but in offering. The sacrifice varied depending on the region and the people performing it. Some left the blood of a goat or a black-feathered bird on a battlefield the night before war, hoping the scent of fresh death would lure the Bananach to hover over their enemies instead of themselves. Others believed that the blood of a willing warrior, someone who knew they would not return from battle, was the only offering that could truly call them forth. But there was always a risk. The Bananach were not like other spirits. They could not be controlled, only invited, and those who sought their presence often found themselves paying the price. If a warrior called them forth, if he spilled the blood to bring them near, he might just find that he had sealed his own fate. Because once the Bananach had arrived, they did not leave until they had seen what they came to see. However, not everyone wished to summon them. There were those who feared them more than death itself, who believed that to fight beneath their gaze was to walk a path that could not be undone. And so, counter-rituals emerged, meant to ward them off, to keep them from taking an interest in those who still wished to fight and live. One such method was the binding stone, a small rock marked with Ogham script, carved with runes meant to confuse or disorient spirits. Before battle, warriors would place these stones on the outskirts of the battlefield, believing that the markings would create a boundary the Bananach could not cross. Others carried them on their person, wrapped in leather, whispering prayers to ensure the spirits would not look upon them. Despite all these efforts, whether to summon, to ward off, or to bargain with them, the Bananach have never been truly controlled. No offering, no binding stone, no whispered oath has ever changed what they are. They appear when they choose, they watch what they wish, and when the battle is done, they leave in silence. The rituals may have brought comfort to those who performed them, a sense of control in a world ruled by chaos, but the truth remains. No mortal can command the Bananach. The Bananach are not beings that can be challenged in battle. They do not carry weapons, nor do they strike down their enemies with brute strength. They do not fight as men do, nor do they engage in duels of honor or strategy. Yet, in the old tales, they have been seen by heroes, those who stood on the front lines of great wars, those whose names were spoken long after their bodies had turned to dust. For many, an encounter with the Bananach was not a test of skill, but of will. To face them was to face the madness of battle itself, to confront the fear that creeps in just before swords clash. Some say the greatest warriors were those who did not succumb to the terror they brought, those who saw the Bananach circling above the battlefield and did not falter. Others believe that no man, no matter how strong, could ever truly withstand their presence, that every warrior who marched beneath their shadow carried some part of that fear with them until the end of their days. One of the most famous encounters with the Bananach is said to have taken place during the legendary cattle raid of Cooley, where the great hero Cuchulainn fought alone against the armies of Connacht. His battles were relentless. Day after day, his body pushed beyond its limits, his mind teetering on the edge of exhaustion. On one of these blood-soaked fields, as he stood over the bodies of countless slain warriors, he saw them. The sky had darkened, though no storm had come, and there, drifting above the battlefield, were the Bananach. They did not descend, nor did they make a sound. They simply watched. Cuchulainn did not fear death, but he knew what they were. He understood that their presence meant he would not leave the battlefield unscathed, that he had already stepped too far into the realm where men and spirits cross paths. Some say he called out to them, demanding to know why they had come. Others claim he ignored them, refusing to acknowledge their gaze, knowing that to look too long was to risk being consumed. But in every version of the tale, one thing remains the same. The Bananach did not leave until the battle was over. Cuchulainn survived that day, but he did not escape their notice. The Bananach had watched him, had marked him, and in the end, he met the death they had always known was waiting for him. Another tale tells of Fionn mac Cumhail, the legendary leader of the Fianna, and his own encounter with the Bananach. Unlike Cuchulainn, Fionn was a man who relied not just on his strength, but on his wisdom. He had heard of the Bananach, knew the stories, and understood what they meant. On the eve of a great battle, he stood on a hill overlooking the battlefield, watching the mist roll in. The air was still, the kind of silence that comes when the world is holding its breath. And then, through the thickening fog, he saw them. The Bananach moved like smoke, shifting, curling, never quite solid, yet unmistakably there. They hung over the battlefield, waiting, knowing that by sunrise, the ground would be soaked in blood. Fionn did not run, nor did he challenge them. Instead, he sat and watched, studying their movements, searching for meaning in their silent vigil. And as he did, he made a decision. He would not fight the next day. Instead, he sent his men into the battle without him. Some called him a coward for it, though those who knew him better understood. Fionn had read the signs, had seen the Bananach lingering like carrion birds, and he had chosen to defy them. And so, when the battle ended, when the fields were littered with the dead, Fionn was still standing. Whether it was wisdom or fate, he had avoided a death that had already been foretold. And though he lived to see many more battles, he never again looked upon the Bananach. The wars of old have faded, but the fear of the Bananach never fully disappeared. Their stories still linger in the cracks of forgotten myths, in the unspoken superstitions of those who understand that not all things tied to death can be buried. Perhaps they are still out there, watching in ways that cannot be seen, waiting for the next great battle.